Communities coming together to make sure we all stay apart and healthy as we fight to slow the spread of the coronavirus. Plus, as distance learning kicks in for schools across the state, how are you handling the homeschooling aspects? That's what we're talking about as we tackle education in the pandemic era, right now on Kansas Week.
Southwest National Bank has proudly served Wichita and its surrounding communities for over 100 years. We are happy to support KPTS, Public Television for Kansas.
This is Kansas Week, and I'm your host, Pilar Pedraza. The coronavirus pandemic has changed almost every aspect of daily life, especially for our children, now adjusting to school at home, and for good reason. Take a look. In the last week, the number of Kansans to officially test positive for COVID-19 has risen to about 620, with 151 hospitalized and at least 17 deaths now attributed to the virus. From doctors to educators, everyone says the situation is changing on a daily basis. Friday afternoon, Wichita Public Schools Superintendent announced several changes to how they'll be delivering learning packets and meals to students for the rest of the semester, and promised those packets are just the start of the distance learning the district teachers are providing.
Teachers will engage students through a variety of methods, including phone calls, online coaching, class meetings, and review of data from online learning tools such as Lexia, Dreambox, Mathia, and Edgenuity, just to name a few.
And joining me this week to help break down all of this, we have Dr. Tiffany Irving, one of the deputy superintendents with the Wichita Public Schools, Suzanne Tobias with the Wichita Eagle, opinion editor and former education reporter, so very versed in this topic. And joining us by Skype, we also have Dr. Brian Jordan with the KASB, Kansas Association of School Boards. Thank you so much.
You bet.
All right. So as we get started with this conversation, I think I'm going to start actually with Dr. Jordan. There have been so many changes, and every district has different issues that it's had to work through as they closed down their buildings and went to distance learning. What are some of the different changes that you've seen districts have to deal with?
Well, about 3 weeks ago, as you're fully aware, the governor put the executive order out to close schools, and at that point in time, the State Department of Education put together a task force. They called it the Continuous Learning Task Force, and that task force was made up of teachers from across the state, administrators from across the state, as well as district leaders. And what that task force started with was what questions would be universal across the state of Kansas that would have to be answered for us to provide continuous learning for kids in these times when the school building we know probably is going to be closed and we can't have kids coming in and out of the school building. And so they put together a set of questions that really allowed district leaders, teachers, as well as administrators and boards to start to unpack what are going to be some of the barriers. And as you can guess, probably number one, as you get out, especially into rural areas of the state, access to internet is a challenge that districts are facing. But we're also hearing from districts such as Wichita, larger urban districts, diverse districts that are having some of those same challenges. And that's one thing. Technology, not only Wi-Fi or internet access, but also simple devices. And so that's a big issue. The other is actually contacting and making sure that families have the information that they need to support their kids. Because as you all are fully aware, we have parents that are home from work. Several of those families are trying to work from home, but now they're also trying to support their kids with their learning, with their technology needs if they're doing something online. There's a whole wide range of challenges that districts are having to work through, from technology and access issues all the way down to just simple communication and making sure that families are getting accurate information, timely information, and the supports that they need.
And Tiffany, Wichita Public Schools, the largest district in the state, obviously very distinct issues facing this district that a lot of the others weren't facing. What were the biggest hurdles Wichita Public Schools faced in trying to make this transition?
Actually, exactly some of the things that Brian just stated, making sure that all of our students have access to resources, and we needed to look at identifying how were we going to find out what those needs were. Was it devices? Was it internet access? Making sure that we had updated information to even be able to communicate with our families. This also, when the announcement came from the governor, occurred during Wichita Public School spring break. So it was a matter of then how do we begin to assemble our leaders to begin to talk about what we were going to do when our staff and students were planning to return that following Monday. So communication was a big piece, and just really being able to sort through what resources we have available, how are we going to put a plan in place so we made sure that our students have access to continuous learning opportunities.
And Susanna, so we're following this in the media. What are some of the issues that you're seeing pop up with parents, with readers?
What's so interesting to me, it's been just an amazing effort on the part of so many school districts across the state and the country. 55 million kids are out of school right now across the country. I mean, the scope of this is just unbelievable. So what was surprising to me coming out of that task force from the state level was this sense of, we need to calm people down. The first thing we need to do is say, take a breath. It's going to be okay. Just really trying to quell some of that panic, because that's exactly what you're hearing. You've got, stir crazy kids and confused parents, and and just saying, words like grace and patience and that sort of thing. But because the times of worry are coming, and I know that there are some serious issues that are going to come out of this that we're going to be talking about for a long time. But it was, I think, that the initial sort of response from school districts that I've heard was just very calming and pretty impressive.
And certainly as we move forward, we're getting more of an idea of how this is going to work. Starting to hear back from parents. Dr. Thompson mentioned today the hotline that the Wichita schools have set up so that parents can, if they call in and ask questions or talk to their local schools. But what are some of the questions that you guys are hearing at this point?
So one of the things that our parents are asking us is, how do I now transition to having my kids home all day and be able to support their academia needs? And so one of the main things that we're trying to communicate to our families is they're not going to do this alone. We are partners, and we're here to help support this transitional time that is new for all of us. And so helping our parents understand how to provide a learning environment for their students, for their kiddos, but also how their teachers are going to be engaged every step of the way to provide that support that's needed.
And certainly we've seen that in the media with teachers doing parades through towns and showing up at people's doorsteps with whiteboards.
Oh, exactly. Just putting the message out there that we're here and we're working. A lot of the questions that I'm hearing from parents are, okay, does this mean are teachers going to have, set office hours where I know that if we email them, we're going to get a response back? But just sort of concerns overall about how much time are we supposed to spend and exactly what we're going to do. But some of the concerns with districts like Wichita right away were children's basic needs. Are they being fed? Do we have their correct contact information, that sort of thing.
Well, so how are teachers and students handling this transition to distance learning? KSN's Andrea Herrera takes us to a Wichita North High Spanish class.
Andrea Bryant is a high school Spanish teacher and says one thing she knows for sure is that her creativity has never been better.
Getting better at Google Classroom.
Since working from home, she's had to think of new ways to stay connected with her students. Bryant says she has 7 classes and around 170 students. She's only been able to interact with less than half. One of the many applications she uses is Google Classrooms. She is also in constant communication via email and phone calls.
So really, we're trying to re-engage students into the learning process, get them to look at math and English and school subjects again, because it's probably been a while.
Brandt also mentioned students are not spending 7 hours a day learning from home, but rather 30 to 40 minutes refreshing their memories. Andrea Herrera, KSN News 3.
And I want to start once again. I want to go back to Brian by Skype to get kind of a statewide look at all of this. Does this, as we talk about how teachers are handling this, just 30, 40 minutes instead of 7 hours a day, using the internet to connect like Google Classroom, et cetera, is that pretty typical of what you're seeing on a statewide level?
Yeah, I think that's probably the most common method. Of course, there's the challenges that are out there with families that don't have access, which, as I mentioned earlier. And so as districts put together their plans, they were encouraged to make sure that those plans had some flexibility. In other words, if a family didn't have access, what's your backup plan for those families? And so you're seeing districts try to adapt and be flexible with that. I will say that the plans or the guidelines that came out from the State Department really did emphasize less is more, and really tried to pare it down to what are those essential things that kids need to make sure that they can maintain and hopefully progress as we head into next fall. But I would say the most common method is online, with a lot of teacher follow-up through email, phone calls. The second most common is what we call, work packets. A lot of districts have connected the distribution of those work packets to the distribution of meals. So as families come through and grab meals for kids, they're picking up work packets, and then they're also able to find ways to turn some of that in, or they're doing a phone call or an email follow-up with a family to see how it's going, and then along with the office hours. So it's kind of a combination of all of those pieces is what we're seeing across the state from different districts. We had a forum last night with board members. We had about 90 board members in a Zoom meeting that was, it was a secure meeting, but these were the exact conversations we were having of how are you reaching all kids, even those that don't have the technology access. And so these were some of the things that they were sharing last night.
Was the feeling overall positive that schools were being able to reach all kids?
Yeah, I think from the board members we've talked to and the superintendents that we've worked with, they're feeling very good about their initial rollout of their continuous learning plans. As you know, though, things are continually evolving with the regulations, the guidelines around the COVID virus. And so right now, I think districts are feeling pretty good about what they've done with the continuous learning plans. But every district that I've talked to still has a percentage of kids that they're working to reach. And so some districts are putting together task force or small groups of teachers to go and actually do home visits to try to reach some of those families that they haven't been able to reach. They're dividing up a list of families that they haven't been able to reach and trying to just reach them any way they can, try to catch them via phone, visits to the house. So they've got the plans put out there. Now they're trying to figure out, okay, we've got a percentage of kids we haven't reached yet. How are we going to make some contact with them? That's probably the next big hurdle that I think is trying to reach 100% of the families in these districts.
And it seems like I'm going to come back to the desk here. Like that's kind of one of the issues Wichita certainly is facing. In her briefing on Friday, Dr. Thompson was like, if you have an address change, please let us know.
Yes, it is something that we have continued to emphasize every opportunity. Dr. Thompson did it at her press briefing. We're putting it on social media, as well as our staff are now reaching out to families, and they're finding that they're not able to make those connections, looking to see what are some of the other contacts that we may have had in the past of emergency contacts that we could reach out to say that we're trying to get in contact with this particular student. Can you please help us get connected with him or her?
I'm sorry, it's a huge concern because in that segment we saw, she has 170 students. She's reached about half of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a lot of students out there just floundering, and I know that's the concern, and it's going to be that huge range of what you're dealing with in Wichita schools. Certainly, you've got the parents that are going to go overboard and have them, in the books, hitting the books 4 hours a day or whatever, and then you're going to have a significant segment of kids that just aren't getting anything. And what's that going to look like in the fall? And I guess my question to you, Dr. Irving, is what will success look like in this environment?
So as of right now, success for us is making 100% contact with students. And so we have staff that beyond our regular classroom teachers that are divided into teams that are trying to do basically investigative work to try to see, can we get a hold of those students that we have not been able to connect with? So success with us would be 100% contact, frequency contact with our teachers and those students and their families to keep them engaged in their learning, whether it is one of the platforms, the online curricular pieces, or whether it is some of the other alternative options related to continuous learning that we've outlined in our plan. But success for us is to have 100% of our kids engaged in learning.
And that itself is just such a Herculean effort.
Yes.
I mean, it's going to be huge.
Well, certainly the parent aspect of education has changed quite a bit. Anyone who's helped a child with their homework on a regular school night has an inkling that homeschooling isn't as easy as it might seem. Those who do it regularly have some advice for how to make it work better for your child. KSN's Jasmine Haynes explains.
Amy Real says getting her 5-year-old and 7-year-old son to focus on their schoolwork at home has been a struggle.
When they're at home, they see home as a place to, play and relax, not a place of where they have to, do a bunch of schoolwork.
She's also working from home. She says juggling it all is a challenge.
I'm at my workload capacity. I don't know that I can do any more than what I'm doing.
Olivia Hayes has been homeschooling her 2 children going on 4 years. She knows a thing or two about homeschooling success. Hayes says don't be afraid to set up and tear down your child's school materials at the start and end of their day.
It really helps set the kids' mind when it's like, okay, get the computer out, get the books out, and then when they go up at the end of the day, they can kind of breathe a sigh of relief that they got all the things done that they need to do.
Remove distractions like smartphones and iPads.
Because, even if it's in their pocket or across the room, it's still a distraction.
And if you're feeling overwhelmed, take a break.
Just give yourself some grace, give the kids some grace. It is okay to take a reset.
Okay to take a recess. In fact, as somebody who's been in the classroom and looked at a lot of the literature, it's actually a good thing to take a recess. It helps kids come back and focus better.
Exactly.
We spend a lot of time, and I'm kind of including myself as an educator at this point because I am also a certified teacher. As teachers, you spend a lot of your time in training in classroom management and how to get kids to focus and that sort of stuff. Are we at the point now where maybe districts are looking at perhaps running some in-services for parents to help them out?
One of the things that I know other districts across the state and as well as across the nation have been doing is providing resources related to that just for our families. And as our continuous learning website is updated very frequently, we will continue to add different type of resources to help our parents understand that. We are wanting our families to know the academia piece, yes, that's important, but also the social emotional support is even more critical during this time. And so providing our families with resources related to how do we support the emotional well-being of our students during this difficult period.
I have a lot of friends who homeschool and say that they've been talking with their friends with kids in public schools, giving them all sorts of advice. Brian, I wanted to check in with you. Were homeschooling groups or parents at all a part of the planning session when schools started looking at this to get an idea of how it would work at home?
I know the State Department, when they put together the task force, reached out to some groups that are their focus is on parental engagement. So actually, when you get into the guidelines that were put out, there's a fairly extensive section on how to engage parents, resources that would be helpful to parents. I think some of the support that parents need isn't so much with the academic side of it. It's how do you set up a day for a kid to be successful and provide the breaks. You can't expect a kid to sit down at a kitchen table and hammer away for 2 hours on something. And so some of the resources that the State Department put together in their task force center around family engagement, and there's some guidance in there about how to help families with what they're ultimately dealing with in this homeschooling environment that they're now thrust into.
Yeah, I know as a teacher, one of the things you're trained at is you change topics every 15, 20 minutes max, and that's at the high school level.
Yes.
Well, I wonder, you have to think that parents are going to have a whole new appreciation for teachers after this, for sure, if they didn't already, which they should. But I mean, yeah, those brain breaks and something as simple as, we're getting questions about, is it okay for them to sleep in now? Or should I be waking them up at the normal time? I mean, what about that sort of thing, the scheduling?
Well, scheduling is really important. And so, whether you're pre-K or whether you're high school, students, kids like to know what's coming next. And so we encourage families to create those schedules, post it on refrigerators or wherever is handy for your family to view. But for your student, your child to be able to see that this is what the day is going to be comprised of. And, if sleeping in a little later is a part of that, that's okay. We all know that probably at times our students aren't getting enough sleep. And so this is an opportunity.
Especially our high schoolers.
Especially our high schoolers. And so as we're talking about, again, supporting that whole child, providing that schedule that allows them to be able to do that and ensuring that there are those times for those brain breaks and being having physical activity and other things that are going to keep them just emotionally ready to be able to focus on when it's time to sit down for some of those academia pieces to be able to do that.
Well, and certainly another aspect of that, when you're in the classroom, a lot of what you're doing is having them work together, socialization, those sort of skills, the soft skills that we talk a lot about. And that's really not going to be included in some of this homeschooling stuff because they are home alone.
They are, but one of the things that I'm really excited about is starting Monday within Wichita is when we transition to phase 2 of our continuous learning plan. And so that's really where the magic is going to happen, where teachers are engaged with students in those platforms that allow students to be engaged with their peers as well as the teacher. And so there will be opportunities for that interaction that they are missing out on when they're not in the regular classroom.
All right. Well, one of the things they're missing out on because they're not in school buildings, or could be missing out, I should say, are meals, because schools provide a lot of services besides just teaching. We know that they do a lot more than just teach children. Just like parents are having to help now with the teaching, other members of the community are jumping in to help with things like distributing food every day. Cake's Chris Lilly takes us along on a delivery run in Goddard.
The coolers are full and Mark Marinelli has the blueprint on a clipboard.
2 kids, 1, 2. I was looking forward to today all day, or since yesterday.
The game plan has changed though for the PE teacher and assistant football coach. With no more school or off-season workouts, Marinelli is finding ways to help the community. He, along with dozens of others, signed up to help deliver thousands of meals to students across the Goddard School District.
Hi guys. I need to help. I need to find a way to still stay connected to families and to some of our kids. It's huge because in our district, that's what our number one job is to build those relationships with our kids and families also.
All students between the ages of 1 and 18 in Goddard can get a free meal. The only requirement is you have to be at one of the pickup spots or along the delivery route to get one.
As a mom, I've really appreciated that because it's built a little bit of structure into a very unstructured time.
It's very helpful to not have to stop and make lunch and with the schoolwork and everything else that we got going on.
The Goddard Transportation and Nutrition Service teams work together every morning to get meals made and delivered to people during this difficult time.
We've had some come up and say that they're both out of work and that they appreciate the food.
Marinelli says those kind of interactions are powerful.
For you? You want lunch for you? We've had a couple of families that have said, this gives us a lot of peace of mind that I can stay working from home and not have to take a break, or rely on the oldest kid maybe making chicken nuggets every day for lunch.
Today was a win for Marinelli and his new team. Countless parents knew exactly where their kids' breakfast and lunch were coming from. From Goddard, Chris Lilly, Cake News on your side.
And of course, we're hearing a lot of stories like this. Every school district, again, a little bit different. Wichita Public Schools on Friday announcing a change in how they're delivering meals.
Yes. So starting Monday, April 6th, we will have our meal distribution at over 18 sites in the Wichita Public School District. That will occur on Mondays and Wednesdays from 11:30 to 12:30. And that is a combination of a hot meal as well as some other cold meals that can hold our students over for lunch for a couple of days until the next distribution date.
Yeah. So the idea behind that change?
We want to provide our students, again, meals to be able to healthy meals during the days that they are at home. But at the same time, we also want to practice social distancing and limit the number of times that we are asking our community to come out to retrieve those meals, as well as our staff being out to deliver and prepare those meals. And so it's for safety reasons for our community, and so it will occur on Mondays and Wednesdays beginning next week.
It's been so interesting to see the evolution of this. It's like every day you learn something.
Yes.
And it is sort of obviously a work in progress and unprecedented. So it's interesting. I think, do you think the same things that are happening at the meal level is going to happen at the lesson level, with teachers figuring out what works for them and changing as they go?
Most definitely. Just from 2 weeks ago, we have evolved in our continuous learning plan. And so I believe as we all become more accustomed to this new reality, we'll get better at it and we'll learn new tips and things that we'll be able to share with our families, as well as our teachers changing a little and how they're delivering that instruction. So, yeah.
And I want to go back to Brian from Topeka. As we've been looking at all these changes, we've mentioned several times throughout this show how quickly they have happened and we've had to roll them out. At the same time, the state over the last couple of years has been working on a long-term complete redesign, the Kansans Can program.
Right.
Is there a feeling that perhaps some of the changes we're seeing here may end up playing into the long-term changes in that Kansans Can redesign?
Yeah, I think that there is a definite connection there. Some of the districts that had jumped into the redesign process almost 2 years ago now were able to very quickly scale up and pivot to their continuous learning plan because they had some of the individualized pieces in place and some of the online pieces in place already as part of the redesign efforts. I think that one of the biggest things that could come out of this is looking at how we use time differently in schools. In our traditional schools, we always viewed school as 7 hours long, divided up into chunks of time, and every kid had to go through those 7 hours in those chunks of time. Some of the districts were looking at that in their redesign efforts with the Kansas Can vision. How do we use time differently and make it more connected to what kids actually need? And you're really seeing a lot of that happen with this continuous learning work that's going across the state. And just yesterday, I was in a meeting with a group of superintendents, and a superintendent made a comment that he's probably seen 5 years of progress in the evolution of how instruction is done with technology in about a 2-week period of time. And this is a person that's been in education for 25 plus years. So it's really forced some changes, but I think there's going to be some things as we look at this, hopefully on the other side, whenever that is, that we can pull from this as great experiences and then build on that to continue to improve our system for kids in Kansas.
Well, thank you very much, Brian, as well as Tiffany and Suzanne for joining me this week. I've enjoyed our discussion. I hope you have as well. If you have ideas for what we should talk about on Kansas Week, shoot us an email at kansasweek@kpts.org. For now, stay home, stay safe, and try to have a great week.
Southwest National Bank has proudly served Wichita and its surrounding communities for over 100 years. We are happy to support KPTS, Public Television for Kansas.